In the swirling snow, a little girl stood trembling, facing the wall, clutching a thin plastic bag. When the quiet millionaire gently asked why, she whispered, "She said I can't come in till I bring food back." His heart broke, and what he did next would change her fate forever. The snow came down like it meant to erase the city. Streetlights blurred. Wind dragged white sheets across the pavement. Most cars moved faster than they should, with drivers eager to get home before the roads turned to ice. A black SUV slowed instead. Its headlights cut through the storm and swept across a narrow alley beside a convenience store. For a second, the light caught something pale against brick. Bare feet. Small. Still. Planted directly on the frozen ground. Jonathan Blake didn't mean to stop. He had a driver's instinct even when he drove himself: observe, calculate, move on. But his foot eased off the gas before his mind caught up. With the headlights shifted higher, a little girl stood facing a brick wall. She couldn't have been older than 7. She wore an old pink dress, thin cotton clinging to her legs as the wind pressed it flat against her knees. No coat, no boots, no hat. Snow gathered in her hair and along her shoulders, melting and freezing again. Her toes were blue. Her knees were locked straight, as if she had been ordered not to bend. Jonathan didn't see panic. He didn't see confusion. He didn't see a lost child spinning in circles, looking for help. He saw posture, stillness, obedience. He pulled the SUV to the curb and turned on the hazard lights. The engine idled softly behind him, warm air humming through vents that suddenly felt obscene. He stepped out into the wind. His tailored wool coat snapped against his legs as he crossed the alley. Expensive leather shoes crunched over ice. He stopped a few feet behind her. "Hey," he said gently, lowering his voice so it didn't carry like a command. "Are you hurt?" The girl didn't turn around. Her forehead remained angled toward the brick, as if the wall were the only thing she was allowed to look at. Her shoulders trembled. Not dramatically, just enough to betray the cold. When she spoke, her voice was barely louder than the wind. "She made me stand here." Jonathan felt something inside him tighten. He moved slowly, circling just enough to see her face in profile. Pale cheeks, chapped lips, her eyes focused on a single crack in the brick, like it was safer than the world behind her. "Who made you stand here?" he asked. She swallowed. Her fingers flexed at her sides. In her right hand, he noticed a thin plastic bag cutting into her skin. Inside, instant noodles, a small loaf of bread, a bruised banana. "I have to bring food back," she whispered. "If I don't, I can't go inside." The wind shifted hard, slicing between buildings. She flinched but did not move her feet. Jonathan removed his coat without thinking. He draped it carefully around her shoulders. She recoiled. Not from him, from the coat, as if warmth might cost her something later. "It's okay," he said quietly. "You're freezing." She didn't look at him, but she didn't shake it off this time. Jonathan scanned the alley. No frantic parent, no open door, no one calling her name. Just the dark rectangle of apartment windows above them. He crouched to her level, not towering, not blocking the exit. "Sweetheart," he said, steady and calm. "What's your name?" A pause. "Claire. Claire. I'm Jonathan. Do you live here?" A small nod. "With your mom?" Another pause. "My aunt." The word didn't carry affection. It carried rules. Jonathan noticed something then, a faint discoloration near her wrist, as the sleeve of her dress shifted in the wind. Old bruising. Faded yellow along the edge of purple. She tugged her sleeve down fast. "I'm not stealing," she added suddenly, shame rising in her voice. "I'm just late." He understood in an instant. Someone had trained her to say that. Jonathan reached slowly into his pocket for his phone. Claire jerked at the movement, panic breaking through the numbness in her face. "Please," she said urgently, finally turning toward him. "Don't call her." The fear in her eyes was sharper than the cold. Jonathan glanced back at the apartment windows. One curtain shifted. A door inside the building opened somewhere above them. The sound echoed faintly through the alley. Why would a child fear help more than sub-zero wind? What kind of home makes a wall safer than a person? The truth behind that door was darker than Jonathan Blake could see from the snow. Before we continue, if you believe every child deserves a safe home, take a moment to like this story and share it. Because sometimes the smallest voices need the loudest support. Jonathan looked back at Claire. Snow gathered along the hem of her pink dress. Her feet had not moved. Not an inch. And somewhere above them, footsteps began descending a staircase. Jonathan Blake had built his life the way some men build fortresses, tall, polished, and impossible to climb. From the outside, it looked like success. The kind of success people pointed at when they wanted proof that discipline paid off. A penthouse above the river, a calendar packed with meetings, a company that carried his name like a stamp of certainty. But inside the walls of his life, everything was quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Museum quiet. The kind that made your footsteps feel too loud. Or there were no children's shoes by the door. No half-finished puzzles on a table. No laughter that showed up unannounced and made a mess of the schedule. There was only order. And the price of that order was distance. Jonathan was respected in boardrooms, feared in negotiations, admired in headlines. Loved was different. Loved required softness. Loved required mistakes. Loved required staying when it would be easier to leave. He hadn't always been like this. There had been a time years ago when Jonathan still believed life would eventually slow down enough for him to catch it. Back then, his older brother, Ethan, had been the one who could pull him out of his own head. The one who laughed loudly, who called him professor when he overthought everything. The one who showed up to Jonathan's first real office with cheap coffee and said, "You did it. Don't forget you're still human." Then came the day that split Jonathan's life into before and after. Not an accident. A phone call. A voice on the other end saying words that didn't sound real. "It's bad. You need to get here." Jonathan had been in a meeting. A deal that would change everything. People around the table with eyes on him, waiting for his signature. He had told himself he would go as soon as it was done. He had told himself 5 more minutes wouldn't matter. And when he arrived, the emergency room was already quiet. Not the calm kind, the final kind. Jonathan wasn't the cause. He didn't push the car. He didn't create the rain-slick road. But he had not been there in time. And guilt, he learned, didn't care about logic. Guilt only cared about the sentence it repeated in the dark. You chose wrong. In his penthouse now, there was a framed photo of him and Ethan on a fishing dock, sun in their eyes, Ethan's arm thrown over his shoulder like the world could never take anything from them. The photo sat on a shelf, turned face down, not because Jonathan didn't remember. Just because remembering made him feel, and feeling made him vulnerable. So he had built a life where nothing unexpected could get in. Until tonight. Until an alley filled with snow. Until bare feet. Until a thin pink dress. until a child who stood like she had been trained not to exist. Back in the present, Jonathan's breath came out in hard clouds. Snow stung his face. The brick wall looked even colder up close, its surface rough and indifferent. Claire stood so still he wondered how long she'd been there. 5 minutes could be a lifetime in weather like this. He saw her hands, again small fingers curled tight around that plastic bag, like the bag was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. He saw the way her shoulders trembled, but her feet refused to move. That wasn't stubbornness. That was fear shaped into obedience. A door somewhere above them creaked again. Footsteps paused. Jonathan felt the instinct to retreat tug at him, the old reflex that had kept him safe in boardrooms and scandals. Don't touch it. Don't get involved. Don't let it become your problem. That instinct had a clean suit and a sharp smile. It sounded reasonable. It also sounded like the voice that had told him to stay in that meeting years ago. He looked at Claire's face, still angled toward the wall as if the wall could protect her from consequences. "Claire," he said softly, testing her name like a promise. "How long have you been out here?" Her lips trembled. The answer came out thin. "Until I learn." Jonathan's stomach tightened. Learn what? Learn to be quiet? Learn to stop needing? Learn to stop being a child? He didn't ask all of that. He didn't need to. The way she said it told him everything. He tried something gentle, something that wouldn't trigger the trap she lived inside. "Did you eat any of that?" he asked, nodding toward the bag. Claire's eyes flickered toward it, then away. "No, but it's not mine." "Who is it for?" She hesitated. Then, in a whisper that felt like confession, she said, "For her." The way she didn't say "my aunt," the way she didn't say a name, as if naming the person would summon her. Jonathan glanced up at the windows again. The curtain shifted back into place. Someone was watching. He felt heat rise behind his ribs, anger, sharp and sudden, but he forced it down. Anger would make him reckless. Reckless would give the wrong people an opening. But he needed to be careful, responsible. He needed to protect Claire and protect the truth so it couldn't be twisted later. "I'm not going to call her," he said, voice steady. "Not right now." Claire's shoulders loosened half an inch, like she had been holding her breath since he arrived. Jonathan shifted closer, still crouched, still keeping himself low. "But I am going to help you," he continued, "because you shouldn't be outside like this. Not ever." Her eyes flashed with something complicated hope, then fear, and then a kind of practiced resignation. Helping wasn't safe in her world. Helping got people punished. "You'll get in trouble," she whispered as if warning him. Jonathan's throat tightened. So young. And already she understood the rules of cruelty. The person who stands up becomes a target. He noticed her sleeve again. The fabric had ridden up slightly as she adjusted the coat on her shoulders. The bruise near her wrist was clearer now, faded but undeniable, like an old fingerprint left by a hand that shouldn't have been there. Claire saw him look. Her whole body stiffened. She yanked the sleeve down hard, hiding it the way someone hides a secret that could explode. And in that small, desperate motion, Jonathan felt the last of his distance crack. He could still walk away. He could still tell himself he had tried. He could still go back to his penthouse and turn another photo face down and pretend the world was not bleeding outside his window. But then Claire spoke, barely audible, and the words landed like a weight on his conscience. "I'm not supposed to talk to strangers," she said. "But you sound like you're staying." Jonathan didn't answer with a speech. He answered with the only thing that mattered. He stayed, and as the footsteps above them started moving again, closer now, descending, Jonathan Blake made a decision that would change his life, her life, and the story that apartment door had been hiding for too long. He would intervene, carefully, responsibly, all the way. The footsteps above the alley didn't need to reach the bottom of the stairs for Jonathan to understand the danger. Not the kind you see in action movies, the kind you feel in your bones when a child's fear isn't imaginary, but practiced. Jonathan rose slowly, placing himself between Claire and the building without making it obvious. His voice stayed calm, almost casual, like he was speaking to the weather. "Claire," he said, gentle but firm, "I'm going to ask you a few simple questions, okay? Just so I can help you the right way." Her fingers tightened around the plastic bag. "What's your full name?" "Claire Myers." "How old are you?" 7. "Do you live in that building?" A small nod. "And the adult you live with, your aunt, what's her name?" Claire hesitated, as if the name itself could sting. "Veronica." Jonathan didn't react outwardly. He stored it away like a key. He glanced down at her feet again. The snow had begun to crust around her toes. Every second outside was stealing something from her body that a child shouldn't have to lose. He made his next decision with the precision of someone who understood consequences. "Claire," he said, "I'm going to take you to the hospital. Not to the police station. Not anywhere scary. The hospital. It's warm and there are doctors there. You're not in trouble." Her eyes darted to the alley mouth, then back to the wall. Her whole body looked ready to freeze itself into invisibility. "Well, you can't," she whispered. "I can," he said softly, "and I will." But he also knew something else. A man putting a child in an SUV in the middle of the night, no matter how pure the intention, could become a weapon in the wrong hands. And Veronica, whatever she was, would not hesitate to use it. So Jonathan did what responsible men do when the stakes are high. He made it visible. He led Claire toward the SUV slowly, giving her time to choose each step. He didn't grab her wrist. He didn't pull. He opened the passenger door and held it open like it was a normal act, like this wasn't a rescue happening in plain sight. Then, before she climbed in, he pointed to the small camera mounted near the rearview mirror. "I'm turning on the recording," he said clearly, speaking not just to Claire, but to the truth. "It's for your safety and mine." He pressed a button. A quiet chime sounded. Jonathan looked into the cabin, voice steady and audible. "My name is Jonathan Blake," he said, calm as a statement in court. "It's snowing heavily. I found a 7-year-old child barefoot in the alley beside the convenience store, facing a wall. Her name is Claire Myers. I'm taking her to the emergency room because she's at risk of exposure. Claire, do you understand where we're going?" Claire swallowed. "The hospital," she whispered. "That's right." He waited, not because he needed permission, because he wanted her to have agency in a world that had taken it from her. Claire climbed in. The warmth hit her like a wave. She flinched at first, like heat was unfamiliar. Jonathan closed the door gently, walked around the front of the SUV, and slid into the driver's seat. The engine purred. Outside, the snow kept falling, indifferent. Inside, Claire sat rigid, wrapped in his coat, staring down at her hands as if she expected punishment for accepting kindness. Jonathan kept both hands visible on the wheel for a moment, an unconscious signal that he wasn't dangerous. Then he reached for his phone. He put it on speaker. He didn't call security. He didn't call a friend. He called the person who could protect the facts. "Cheryl Stanton," he said, when the line connected, voice low but urgent. "It's Jonathan. I need guidance now." Cheryl wasn't just a lawyer. She was the kind of counsel you called when a situation that could ruin a life or save one. And tonight, Jonathan didn't need a clever argument. He needed the law to move faster than harm. Cheryl's voice came through crisp and alert, the sound of someone who had learned to wake up ready for emergencies. "Where are you?" 2 minutes from St. Mercy ER. I found a child 7 years old, barefoot in the snow, facing a wall. She says her aunt made her stand outside until she brought food back. A beat of silence, then Cheryl's tone sharpened into instruction. "Go straight to the ER entrance. Request a social worker and a mandated report immediately. Or tell the triage nurse you want everything documented. Do not engage the guardian alone. And Jonathan, keep your dash recording running." A mandated report meant one thing. The hospital was legally required to alert Child Protective Services (CPS) the moment they suspected a child wasn't safe. It wasn't getting someone in trouble. It was the system putting a hand between a child and the dark. Jonathan exhaled once, controlled. "It's on." "Good. Any identifying info?" "Name is Claire Myers. Aunt is Veronica." "Okay," Cheryl said. "You're doing the right thing. Speak in facts. Let professionals take over." Claire's head lifted slightly at the sound of another adult voice. Her eyes flicked to Jonathan, searching his face like she was trying to understand what kind of man calls a lawyer before he calls anyone else. Jonathan glanced at her and softened his voice. "You're not getting in trouble tonight," he said again, slower this time, like he wanted the words to settle into her bones. Claire didn't answer, but her shoulders dropped, just a fraction, like her body wanted to believe him even if her mind couldn't yet. The road ahead glowed under streetlights, slick with ice. Jonathan drove carefully, slow enough to feel the weight of every second. The contrast inside the car was almost unbearable. His tailored coat wrapped around her thin pink dress. Warm leather seats under a child who had been standing on frozen ground. A man with a life built on control. And a child who had never been allowed to control anything. The hospital emerged through the storm like a ship, bright and solid. Automatic doors hissed open. The fluorescent light spilling onto the curb made the snow look like ash. Jonathan pulled into the emergency drop-off, parked, and stepped out quickly. Cold hit him like a slap. He opened Claire's door. She didn't move right away. Her eyes latched onto the hospital sign, then the sliding doors, as if she was afraid the building might reject her the way home did. Jonathan didn't rush her. He offered his hand, not demanding, just present. After a moment, Claire took it. Her fingers were numb, light as paper. Jonathan guided her out. Then, when he felt her shiver deepen, he lifted her carefully into his arms. Not like a trophy, like something precious that might break. As he walked toward the entrance, he made sure people saw them. Staff, security, witnesses, light. At triage, and he spoke clearly, every word a brick in a wall of truth. "She was outside barefoot in the snow," he said. "I found her facing a wall beside the convenience store. She appears to have been left there as punishment. I'm requesting a mandated report and a social worker. Please document everything." A nurse's expression changed instantly. Professional concern snapping into place. Claire was guided onto a bed. A blanket went over her legs. Hands moved quickly, efficiently. When the nurse lifted the blanket to check her feet, Claire's breath caught. And her eyes went wide, not from pain, but from panic, as if being seen was dangerous. She turned her face toward Jonathan, and for the first time, her voice didn't sound like a rule. It sounded like truth. "If she finds me here," Claire whispered, trembling harder now, "she'll say I lied." Hospitals had their own kind of cold. Not the cold of snow and wind. This was fluorescent, practical, indifferent. The kind that didn't care who you were. It treated everyone the same. And tonight, that was exactly what Claire needed. A nurse, soft-voiced, steady-handed, pulled a pair of thick socks from a warming drawer. They weren't fancy. They weren't new miracles. They were simply warm. She knelt, slid them gently over Claire's feet, and tucked the blanket around her ankles like she was sealing heat back into a body that had been losing it. Claire's face crumpled. Not loud crying, not dramatic, just a silent spill of tears, as if her body didn't know what to do with kindness that didn't come with a price. The nurse paused, not startled, not impatient. She only said, "There you go, sweetheart," as if this was normal, as if children were supposed to be cared for. Claire stared at her socked feet like she couldn't believe they belonged to her. Jonathan watched from the side of the bed, jaw tight. He'd negotiated billion-dollar contracts without his hands shaking. Tonight, his fingers curled into fists inside his pockets. Because he was watching a child learn, in real time, that warmth could exist without punishment. A pediatric ER physician entered, Dr. Elise Warren. Calm presence, direct eyes, the kind of doctor who could speak gently and still cut through lies. She introduced herself to Claire first. "Hi, Claire. I'm Dr. Warren. And I'm going to check you out, okay? Just to make sure you're safe." Claire nodded once, small, cautious. Dr. Warren's exam was professional, careful, and deliberate. She didn't yank sleeves. She didn't expose anything unnecessarily. She narrated what she was doing, step by step, giving Claire control where she could. But Jonathan saw it in the doctor's face, the shift that happens when a medical professional stops seeing a cold night and starts seeing a pattern. Dr. Warren noted what she needed to note. Injuries in different stages of healing. Skin irritation consistent with prolonged exposure. The kind of small physical evidence that didn't scream on camera but spoke loudly in a chart. She didn't accuse. She documented. And documentation, in cases like this, was not paperwork. It was protection. A hospital social worker arrived next, Marisol Grant. Warm eyes, a calm tone that didn't push. She sat down at a comfortable distance from Claire, not looming, but not cornering. "Claire," Marisol said softly, "I'm here to help you. No one's mad at you." Claire looked at the blanket. Her voice came out rehearsed, like lines she'd practiced in the mirror. "My aunt is strict because she loves me." Marisol didn't challenge it. Not yet. She simply nodded, as if honoring Claire's need to say the right thing first. "That sounds like something you've had to tell yourself a lot," Marisol said gently. "Can you tell me what happened tonight?" Claire hesitated. She glanced toward Jonathan for a second, then back down. Her fingers pinched the edge of the blanket until her knuckles went pale. "I was just late," she whispered. Jonathan felt the words land like a bruise. Late. As if a 7-year-old child could be punished for time the way adults get punished for mistakes. Marisol's pen moved quietly across a notepad. Dr. Warren typed into the medical record. Time stamps clicked into place. Names, observations, Claire's statements. The kind of small, boring details that would later become unbreakable. Then the fear clue arrived. A phone buzzed on the counter. It was a tiny sound nothing to most people. To Claire, it was a siren. Her whole body jolted. She scrambled backward on the bed, eyes wide, breath trapped. It wasn't acting. It wasn't exaggeration. It was reflex. Her throat tightened around one word. Veronica. Jonathan didn't move closer. He didn't grab. He didn't overwhelm her panic with his presence. He simply stayed where he was, steady, visible, safe. Marisol lowered her voice even further. "You don't have to answer anything you don't want to," she said. "But I want you to know something, Claire. Right now, in this room, you are safe." Claire's breathing came in shallow, uneven pulls. She pressed her hands to her chest like she was trying to hold her heart in place. Dr. Warren glanced toward Jonathan briefly. Not judgment, not suspicion, recognition. Well, this wasn't a child who was scared of a stranger. This was a child who was terrified of the person who claimed to love her. Jonathan's mind flashed unwanted, vivid to the emergency room years ago. Ethan's absence, the helplessness, the moment he arrived too late and realized time doesn't forgive you. He heard it again in his head, not as guilt this time, but as a vow. This time, I'm not late. Marisol asked questions with care, not pressure. "Did your aunt tell you to stand facing the wall?" Claire nodded once, barely. "Did she tell you why?" Claire swallowed. Her voice cracked. "Because I talk too much." A 7-year-old, punished for speaking. Jonathan's stomach turned. Marisol wrote it down. Dr. Warren wrote it down. And then the system, the one that sometimes failed children, did what it was designed to do when the right people insisted. They called Child Protective Services. A CPS report was initiated. An investigator was requested for emergency evaluation. But hospital security was alerted to be on standby if needed. The process began to move, slow but real, like gears finally catching. Claire's eyes kept darting toward the door. Not because she wanted to leave, because she expected someone to burst through it. Jonathan's phone vibrated in his pocket. A text. Unknown number. He looked down. "Bring her back. Now, or you'll regret it." The message sat on the screen like a threat carved into ice. Jonathan didn't show it to Claire, and he didn't want her fear to grow sharper. But Marisol saw his face change. Dr. Warren saw it too. Jonathan lifted his gaze to them, voice low, controlled. "She knows," he said. "Or she's trying to make me believe she does." Outside the room, the hallway stretched bright, and busy nurses moving, carts rolling, voices calling names. Inside the room, the air tightened, because the truth had already begun to fight back. And somewhere in the city, Veronica was no longer simply a shadow behind an apartment door. She was coming. Veronica didn't find the hospital by accident. She found it the way controlling people always did, fast, loud, and through other people's fear. Back at the convenience store, the clerk behind the counter had watched the scene unfold through the glass. Seen the black SUV stopped too long. Seen a small figure in pink move away from the alley. Seen a man lift the child as if she weighed nothing at all. The clerk knew Veronica. Everyone in that little pocket of the city knew Veronica. And she was the woman who paid in crisp bills and spoke in sharp edges, the woman who didn't smile but expected people to smile at her, the woman who said, "my niece," like it was ownership. So when the clerk saw Claire leave with a stranger, panic and obligation tangled together in his chest. He picked up his phone, and within minutes, Veronica had a direction, a target, and a story already forming on her tongue. At St. Mercy, the ER never truly slept. But the night still had soft spots, moments when the hallways quieted, when the only sounds were distant footsteps and the steady beep of machines. Claire's room was one of those soft spots. Dr. Warren had stepped out to finalize notes. Marisol was filing the initial report. Jonathan stood near the doorway, keeping his presence visible without crowding the bed. Claire lay under a blanket, eyes open, watching the ceiling tiles like they might change into something kinder if she stared long enough. Then the soft spot shattered. A commotion rose from the hallway heels striking too fast, voices lifting too loud, and then the door swung open. Veronica entered as if the room belonged to her. She was dressed for an audience. Tailored coat, hair perfect, makeup untouched by weather. She looked less like someone searching for a child and more like someone arriving to win an argument. Her eyes landed on Claire first. For a fraction of a second, her face flashed with something raw anger, not relief. Then the mask slid on, smooth and practiced. "Oh my God!" Veronica cried, loud enough for the nurse's station to hear. "Claire! Claire, sweetheart, what did you do?" Her gaze snapped to Jonathan, and in that instant, she built him into a villain. "You!" she said, voice sharp as broken glass. "Who are you? Why is my niece here with you?" Jonathan didn't rise to the bait. He didn't match her volume. He turned slightly, so his body stayed between Veronica and the bed without blocking anyone's view. His voice was calm, factual. "My name is Jonathan Blake. I found Claire barefoot in the snow, facing a wall in the alley beside the convenience store. I brought her here for medical care and requested a mandated report." Veronica let out a laugh that wasn't humor. It was performance. "That's kidnapping," she announced, louder now. "That's what that is. She ran away. She lies. She does things for attention. And you..." She pointed as if the gesture alone could convict him. "You took her." Claire's body reacted before her mind could. She shrank into the pillow. Her eyes drifted toward the blank section of wall beside the bed, the same way they had drifted in the alley like the wall was a safer place to put her fear. Jonathan felt it, the way trauma moved through a child like a command. Veronica stepped closer. Too fast, too entitled. "Come here," she said, reaching, and her voice suddenly low and dangerous beneath the sugary tone. "We're going home." Claire didn't move, but her hands clenched under the blanket. Jonathan shifted one step forward, not aggressive, protective, and he remembered Cheryl's voice in his ear. "Speak in facts. Let professionals take over. Don't engage her alone." So he did the strongest thing a quiet man could do in a loud moment. He called for the room to fill with witnesses. "Nurse," Jonathan said, turning his head slightly toward the hall, "could we have the social worker back in here, please? And Dr. Warren, also security." Veronica's head snapped toward the doorway. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "You can't. She's mine." Jonathan kept his tone even. "Doctor," he added as staff approached, "I'd like everything documented. Social worker present, please. Security can review footage. I'm not here to hide anything." That sentence changed the air. Because abusers thrive in shadows and confusion, documentation was light, and Veronica's expression flickered irritation, then calculation. She leaned into her new script. "Claire has issues," she said, voice trembling on cue. "She makes things up. She wants sympathy. I'm her guardian. I take care of her. And this man, this stranger, has no right." Marisol returned first, stepping into the room like a steady anchor. "Ma'am," Marisol said calmly, I'm the hospital social worker. We have a responsibility to assess safety concerns. Claire will remain here until the medical team clears her and CPS completes an emergency evaluation. Veronica's eyes narrowed. I don't consent, she snapped. Dr. Warren entered next, professional and firm. This isn't about consent, Dr. Warren said. This is about medical assessment and the law. Veronica's voice rose, aiming for the hallway now, aiming for strangers. Do you hear this? They're keeping my niece from me. She ran away. He took her. A few heads turned outside the room. Well, Veronica wanted a crowd. She wanted pressure. She wanted Jonathan to look like the threat. And for a brief moment, the old world tried to return, the world where people look away because it's easier. Then Veronica made her mistake. She moved toward the bed again, reaching past Jonathan as if he were nothing. Claire's breath hitched. Her eyes widened. Her shoulders drew up like armor. Jonathan stepped in smooth, steady, non-violent, but absolute. He lifted one hand, palm open, not touching Veronica, not pushing, just blocking the space the way a doorframe blocks a storm. And he said the sentence that cracked the room's gravity in half. She does not have to look at you right now. It wasn't an insult. It wasn't a threat. It was a boundary. Jonathan turned to the nurse with a quiet nod. Could you close the curtain, please? The curtain slid along its track with a soft, thin fabric, but powerful in meaning. And it created a small world inside the room where Claire could see only safety. The blanket, the nurse's hands, Marisol's calm face, Jonathan's steady presence. Veronica froze. For a heartbeat, her mask fell completely. Her eyes went cold. Not worried cold. Ownership cold. CPS policy and hospital protocol moved like an invisible shield. Security stepped closer. Marisol positioned herself where she could see everyone. Dr. Warren's chart sat open time-stamped, documented, undeniable. Veronica's voice dropped, losing its sweetness. This is ridiculous, she hissed. Jonathan didn't respond. He didn't need to. Because the truth was finally in the light, and light makes certain people dangerous. Veronica leaned toward him, just close enough that only he could hear, breath warm with fury. You just made yourself my enemy. And Jonathan, quiet as ever, held her gaze without flinching, because he could feel Claire trembling behind the curtain, and he understood something Veronica never would. Some enemies are worth making. By the time Veronica was escorted out, the air in the room felt thinner-like. Everyone had been holding their breath and hadn't realized it. Claire stayed behind the curtain, silent, her small body curled inward beneath the blanket. The hospital noises returned, distant intercom calls, rolling carts, the soft rhythm of a place that keeps moving, even when one room feels like the whole world. Marisol leaned in gently. Claire, she said, voice low, you did nothing wrong. Claire didn't answer, all but her fingers loosened slightly from the edge of the sheet. Dr. Warren finished her documentation with a kind of clinical calm that wasn't cold. It was protective. Every note, every timestamp, every observation was a barrier Veronica couldn't talk her way through later. Then a woman arrived who didn't bring comfort first. She brought clarity. Donna Cho, CPS investigator. Mid-30s, hair pulled back, winter coat still dusted with snow. She didn't speak loudly. She didn't posture. She walked into the room the way people do when they've seen too many versions of the same nightmare, and refused to let another child fall through the cracks. Dana introduced herself to Claire first, not to Jonathan. "Hi, Claire. My name is Dana. I help kids stay safe." Claire's eyes flicked toward the curtain, then toward Jonathan, as if her body still expected permission to exist. Dana's gaze softened. "You can talk as much or as little as you want. Well, but I need to ask you something important." Claire swallowed. "Okay." Dana asked simple questions in a steady rhythm. Where Claire lived, who else lived there, whether anyone else knew she'd been outside. Claire's answers came out small and careful, like stepping across a floor she believed might break. When Dana turned to Jonathan, her tone remained professional, but there was something else there too, an acknowledgement that he'd done this the right way. "You called a mandated report immediately," Dana said. "You involved medical staff. You documented. That matters." Jonathan nodded once. His voice stayed controlled. "My attorney advised it." "Good attorney," Dana replied. Dana's next words carried weight. "Claire cannot go back tonight." The sentence landed like a door locking. Jonathan felt the relief in it and the fear, because "cannot go back" meant Veronica would escalate. People like Veronica didn't accept boundaries. They attacked them. Dana continued, matter of fact. "We'll pursue an emergency safety plan. The hospital can hold her temporarily, but we need a placement option tonight that's safe and monitored." Dana's eyes flicked to the clock. Nights like this didn't come with perfect choices, only urgent ones. "If she stays here, Veronica will keep circling the doors," Dana said. "And Claire will hear it, feel it." She lowered her voice. "Tonight has to be quiet. Quiet is safety." Jonathan didn't speak at first. He understood the danger of offering too quickly. He understood how it could look. So he said it the way Cheryl had coached him, clean and structured. "I'll cooperate with whatever process is required," he said. "Background checks, home evaluation, security, any oversight you need." Dana didn't smile. She wasn't moved by wealth or headlines or a nice suit. "Then we do this the right way," she said. "Emergency placement CPS approved, documented, witnessed." She pulled out forms and began calling it in step by step, like laying track in front of a moving train. A case number, a temporary safety plan, a no-contact order request, and yes, an on-call check at your residence tonight. Dana studied him for a beat. Not suspicious. Careful. Then she nodded. "I can authorize a temporary placement through approved channels with conditions. You'll sign paperwork. You'll agree to no contact with Veronica. And you understand this isn't custody. Not yet." Jonathan didn't hesitate. "Yes." Claire listened from the bed, eyes wide, as if the word "yet" was the only thing keeping hope from becoming dangerous. An hour later, after more signatures and careful instructions, Jonathan walked Claire out of the hospital through a side entrance to avoid the main lobby. Snow still fell, but the wind had softened. The world looked quieter, as if it didn't know what had just shifted. Claire climbed into the SUV without being told this time. Said her small hands still held that plastic bag of groceries like a proof of duty, even though no one had asked her to carry it. Jonathan didn't take it from her. He let her keep it. Taking it might have felt like taking control. He drove slowly, the city passing in gray and white, streetlights smeared by snowfall. Claire stared out the window, blinking hard, like she didn't trust warmth to last. Jonathan's home was modern, clean lines, quiet surfaces, glass and steel, and it had always been designed to impress. Tonight, he made it gentle. He turned on lamps instead of overhead lights. The softer glow made the space feel less like a showroom and more like a place where people belonged. In the kitchen, he warmed soup on the stove, simple, safe. He found a soft throw blanket and set it on the couch. He laid out a spare set of pajamas he'd barely ever used for guests, then called the building concierge to deliver a child-sized winter coat and slippers from an overnight service. Money could move fast. Love couldn't. But it could start with comfort. Claire sat at the table, feet now in borrowed slippers, shoulders hunched inside his coat. She ate slowly, as if expecting someone to snatch the bowl away mid-bite. Halfway through, she slipped a dinner roll into her pocket, with a movement so practiced it was almost invisible. Jonathan saw it, and he did what wise protectors do when shame has been used as a weapon. He pretended he didn't. No correction, no scolding, no spotlight, just safety. After dinner, he showed her the guest room. It was quiet, warm, neat. He placed a nightlight on the dresser shaped like a small moon. When he turned it on, a soft glow spilled across the walls. Claire stared at it like it was magic. "You can leave it on," Jonathan said. "All night." Her voice came out tiny. "Is that allowed?" Jonathan's throat tightened. "In this house," he said gently, "it is." Claire nodded once. She didn't smile. Smiling might have felt like tempting fate. When Jonathan stepped back toward the door, she asked without looking at him, "Are you going away?" He understood the question underneath. "Are you leaving me where she can reach me?" Jonathan kept his tone steady. "I'll be right outside." He sat in the hallway, back against the wall, not across from her door, like a guard beside it, like a promise. Minutes passed. The building hummed softly. Heat moved through vents. The world should have been calm. And then Claire's trauma rose like a tide. A small sound from the street. A distant car door. A muffled shout was enough. Claire woke up with a sharp inhale, eyes wide, body rigid. Her hands clawed at the blanket as if she'd been dragged back to that brick wall in the alley. "I'm sorry," she whispered into the dark. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." Jonathan didn't burst in. He didn't crowd her fear. He leaned closer to the door and spoke through it, voice low and anchored. "You don't have to apologize for being afraid," he said. "You're safe, and I'm here." Silence stretched. Then her breathing slowed by fractions like a storm easing, one gust at a time. Jonathan remained in the hallway anyway, because staying wasn't dramatic. It was discipline. His phone vibrated in his hand. "Cheryl." He answered quietly. "Talk to me." Her voice was sharp with urgency. "Veronica filed an emergency motion. She's accusing you of interference and coercion. And she's threatening to go public. She wants to paint you as a predator." Jonathan closed his eyes for a beat. Not because he was surprised, because he knew what that kind of accusation could do. Cheryl continued, "You did everything right, but that won't stop her from attacking. Be prepared for a fight." Jonathan's gaze went to the closed guest room door. On the other side of it was a child who had learned to fear help more than cold. "I'm prepared," he said. "Good," Cheryl replied. "Oh, because your board just requested a crisis meeting tomorrow morning." The word board hit like ice water. Jonathan looked down at his suit jacket folded over a chair. At the hallway light, he refused to turn off. At the quiet door beside him. He had spent years building a life that couldn't be shaken. And now, doing the right thing was about to shake everything. He didn't move from the floor. He stayed right there in the hallway, quiet, vigilant, unflinching, because Veronica wasn't done, and the cost of protecting Claire was about to come due. The months that followed became a war of paperwork, hearings, and exhaustion. Not the kind of war that makes headlines with dramatic music behind it. The kind that happens in offices with stale coffee, in fluorescent court corridors, in emails stamped urgent, in calendars that fill up with dates you can't cancel because a child's future is sitting inside them. Veronica moved fast. She didn't come at Jonathan with fists. She came with narratives. Within days, hush whispers started to circulate in the places that mattered. Investor circles, charity boards, even the polite social spaces where people pretended they didn't gossip. A millionaire took a little girl. He staged a rescue. He's trying to look like a hero. What kind of man inserts himself into a family like that? The words were clean. That was the point. Clean words are easier for strangers to believe than messy truth. Jonathan's PR team begged him to disappear for a while. Let the process play out, they said. If you stay visible, you become the story. His board didn't beg. They demanded. The crisis meeting was held in a glass conference room where the city looked small and controllable below them. Men and women in tailored clothing watched Jonathan like he was a risk assessment. You understand how the public will read this, one board member said, tapping a pen against a folder. This could destroy the company's reputation. Another leaned back, voice smoother. We're not saying don't help. We're saying, be careful. Step away publicly. Let professionals handle it. Jonathan listened. Calm face, still posture. Inside, something older than business was tightening. Because he'd heard a version of this argument before. It sounded like, not now, later, after the meeting, after the deal. And he remembered exactly where later had led him. He kept his voice low. I am letting professionals handle it, he said. That's why CPS is involved. That's why the hospital documented everything. That's why my attorney is filing motions instead of statements. A board member's jaw flexed. And yet your name is all over it. Jonathan didn't raise his voice. I won't abandon a child to protect a stock price, he said simply. The room went quiet. Because in corporate spaces, that sentence sounded like profanity. But outside those windows, down in the real city, Claire was learning how to sleep without flinching. And that mattered more than anyone at the table wanted to admit. Veronica escalated again. She filed motions demanding immediate return. She accused Jonathan of manipulation. She hinted at criminal intent without ever saying it directly, like smoke drifting under a door. And in public, she performed grief and outrage with precision. In court paperwork, she called herself a devoted guardian. In her social posts, she called Jonathan a stranger with an agenda. In private, she did what predators do when they lose control. She tried to scare him back into silence. Jonathan received anonymous emails, messages that disappeared after being sent, warnings phrased like advice. Walk away before you get hurt. Cheryl Stanton didn't flinch. She built the case the way she always did, brick by brick, detail by detail, no drama, no shortcuts. She knew something Veronica didn't. Truth wasn't loud. Truth was persistent. Dr. Elise Warren's medical documentation became the spine of the case. Time-stamped notes, photos, injury patterns consistent with neglect and repeated exposure. Clinical language that didn't care about excuses. Marisol Grant's reports filled in the human story. Claire's initial approved lines, her panic at Veronica's name, her reflex to apologize for existing. Dana Cho's CPS findings added weight. Risk assessment, home evaluation, inconsistencies in Veronica's statements, a clear pattern of coercive control. And slowly, painfully slowly, the world around Veronica began to crack open. School records surfaced, absences explained away. Teachers who had noticed Claire's silence, her flinching, her habit of standing near walls during recess like she was trying to disappear. Neighbors came forward, not with certainty, but with pieces. The late-night shouting, the times they'd seen Claire outside too long in the cold, the way Veronica's apartment door shut like a slammed verdict. None of it alone was enough. Together, it formed a picture no performance could erase. Claire began therapy, not the gentle, tidy kind people imagine. A real therapy is uneven, it's exhausting, it's brave. Some days Claire spoke in full sentences, surprising herself with the sound of her own voice. Other days she froze at simple questions, eyes drifting to blank walls as if walls still held instructions. She startled at raised voices. She flinched when someone moved too quickly. She apologized when she dropped a spoon. Jonathan learned to recognize the moments before a spiral. How her fingers went stiff, how her breathing changed, how her gaze locked onto a corner of the room like she was about to vanish into it. He didn't demand progress. He offered presence. He kept the porch light on every night. He kept the moon-shaped nightlight glowing in her room. He created small rituals that didn't ask her to be fearless, only to be safe. Cocoa at the same time each evening. A soft knock before he entered any room, and so surprises wouldn't feel like threats. A simple phrase he repeated until it began to settle inside her. You don't have to earn your place here. Jonathan changed too. Not in speeches, not in grand gestures, in choices. He started leaving meetings early. He stopped taking late-night calls. He learned the names of Claire's stuffed animals because she needed them to feel real. He read bedtime stories badly, stumbling over the voices, mispronouncing words, making her laugh at the wrong parts. That laughter mattered, because it was the sound of a child returning to herself. And the more Jonathan showed up, the more his old fortress life began to look less like success and more like loneliness he'd been calling discipline. Still, the pressure didn't stop. One morning, a major investor requested a private call. Jonathan, the man said, voice polite, sharp underneath. I respect what you're trying to do, but you're exposing us. Jonathan's answer was calm. Then you should decide what kind of company you want to be. Silence. Because moral clarity makes some people uncomfortable. That same week, a deal fell apart. A partner paused negotiations. The headlines didn't say why. They didn't have to. Veronica's noise was doing its job, but Cheryl's work was doing its job too. One afternoon, Cheryl arrived with a folder thick enough to look like a weapon. She sat at Jonathan's kitchen table, where Claire had recently begun to draw without asking permission. Cheryl didn't smile. She didn't soften the truth. She's not just fighting for custody, Cheryl said. She's fighting to punish you for seeing the truth. Jonathan stared at the folder, then at the hallway where the nightlight still glowed even in daylight. He thought of his brother's voice, his brother's laugh, the guilt that had shaped him for years. Then he thought of a 7-year-old girl in a pink dress, barefoot in the snow, facing a wall like the wall was safer than anyone alive. Yet Jonathan's hands tightened around his mug. Then we don't blink, he said quietly. Cheryl nodded once. Good, she replied. Because the next hearing is where she's going to try to destroy you. And from the hallway, Claire's small voice drifted in, soft, cautious, still learning trust. Jonathan? He stood immediately, the way you stand when something matters. Yes, Claire? A pause, then. Are you still here? Jonathan looked toward Cheryl, then toward the child, who had asked the question like it was the most dangerous thing she could say. His answer didn't waver. I'm still here, he said, and I'm not going anywhere. Outside, winter loosened its grip inch by inch, but the fight wasn't over. It was simply moving toward the place where truth would have to speak louder than noise. Courtrooms are never as dramatic as television promises. There is no swelling music, no thunderclap verdict. Just fluorescent lighting, stacked files, wooden benches that creak when people shift under pressure, and fear that either hardens or tells the truth. Jonathan sat at the edge of the bench beside Cheryl Stanton. His posture was straight, his hands folded loosely in front of him. He wasn't the loudest presence in the room. He didn't need to be. Across the aisle sat Veronica, on perfect hair, muted suit, a face arranged carefully into sorrow. She dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue, glancing occasionally toward the judge with practiced vulnerability. If someone had walked in without context, they might have mistaken her for the injured party. That was her gift. Performance. But performance fractures under evidence. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The air shifted from murmured tension to structured order. This wasn't a movie. It was procedure. And procedure, when respected, protects the smallest voice in the room. Veronica's attorney spoke first. Polished tone, strategic pauses. He described his client as a dedicated guardian navigating difficult circumstances. He suggested Claire had behavioral challenges. He implied that Jonathan Blake, a wealthy, influential man, had inserted himself into a fragile family dynamic for reasons that were not entirely clear. He never said anything criminal. He didn't need to. He planted doubt. But when it was Cheryl's turn, she didn't match theatrics. She presented structure. Medical documentation was entered into record. Dr. Elise Warren's notes, photographs, timestamps. Clear language describing repeated exposure, injury patterns inconsistent with accidents, clinical concern for neglect. CPS findings followed. Dana Cho's assessment of risk. Prior complaints. Environmental observations. A documented pattern of coercive control. School records were introduced. Absences. Behavioral notes. Teachers who testified to Claire's hypervigilance and silence. Neighbors spoke in measured tones about nights they'd heard shouting. About seeing Claire outside longer than made sense. Brick by brick. No yelling. No drama. Just truth. Veronica's composure thinned with each exhibit. When she took the stand, she tried once more to reframe the story. I was disciplining her, she said, voice trembling at the edges. Children need structure. She exaggerates. Well, she lies when she's scared. The judge listened without expression. Then came the part that mattered most. Claire did not testify in open court. The judge had ordered it that way to protect her. No courtroom spotlight, no predator's stare, just a child-friendly room, a specialist beside her, and the freedom to speak without having to be brave in front of the person who taught her fear. She gave a recorded statement earlier in a child-sensitive setting with a specialist present. No audience. No intimidation. The courtroom fell silent as the recording began. Claire sat in a small, neutral room on screen. No wall behind her, just soft lighting and a quiet chair. Her feet didn't touch the floor. Her voice was small, but it did not shake. When I stand there, she said, eyes fixed on something beyond the camera, I disappear. That's what she wants. Silence pressed against the walls of the courtroom. Not dramatic silence, heavy silence, the kind that rearranges how people breathe. Veronica's jaw tightened. Her attorney scribbled something frantic onto a pad. Claire continued. She says if I come back without food, I don't get to come inside. And if I look at her, I have to stand longer. The recording ended. No tears, no breakdown. Just a child describing the mechanics of control like she was explaining the weather. The judge removed her glasses slowly. He spoke with the steady cadence of someone who understood the weight of the moment. Based on medical evidence, CPS findings, and the child's statement, the court finds sufficient cause to terminate guardianship. Veronica's breath caught sharply. Protective orders were issued. Custody was granted to Jonathan under structured supervision pending final adoption. It wasn't the end of the road. It was the first stretch of solid ground. Court-ordered check-ins, home studies, interviews, therapy reports, the slow, unnecessary work of proving again and again that safety wasn't a moment. It was a pattern. It was not loud. It was final. Jonathan did not celebrate. He exhaled. Because the fight had not been about winning. It had been about protection. Outside the courthouse, the air felt different. Winter had loosened its grip. The sky was pale, almost hesitant with sunlight. Claire stood beside Jonathan, holding his hand, her coat zipped to her chin. She looked smaller than the system she had just survived. "Is it done?" she asked quietly. Jonathan knelt to her level. "It's done," he said. She searched his face for the part he wasn't saying. "She can't make me stand there anymore?" "No," he said, steady as a promise. "She can't." Claire didn't smile immediately. Freedom, when you've never had it, feels unfamiliar. Months passed, not in montage, in routine. Therapy sessions, school mornings, slow rebuilding. Adoption paperwork moved forward through structured review, home studies, interviews. Jonathan answered every question with transparency, most because he understood something now. Love was not possession. Love was accountability. The day the adoption was finalized, there were no fireworks, just signatures, and a judge who looked at Claire and said, "You're safe." Back home, Claire stood in the hallway staring at a blank wall. The same posture, the same stillness. Jonathan felt his heart seize for a split second. Then Claire turned around, this time by choice. She held a box of crayons. "Can I draw on it?" she asked. Jonathan looked at the clean, expensive paint, the pristine surface he once would have protected. "Yes," he said without hesitation. Claire pressed the first crayon to the wall. Sunlight. A small house. A bright yellow moon like the nightlight in her room. She didn't face the wall anymore. She changed it. Jonathan left the porch light on every night after that. Not because fear vanished overnight. Because consistency heals, and then, quietly, the seasons shifted. Time jump. 18 months later. The snow had melted into memory. Morning light spilled across the sidewalk outside Jonathan's building, soft and steady. Claire stepped out the front door in a real winter coat that fit her shoulders. Her hair was neatly brushed. A backpack bounced gently against her back. She didn't glance over her shoulder for permission. Jonathan locked the door and stepped beside her. He didn't reach down to lead her. He matched her pace. Claire slipped her hand into his. Natural now, unforced. They walked toward the school entrance together, crossing streets where the light turned green in their favor. Claire swung their joined hands once, then again. testing joy the way she once tested fear. At the crosswalk, she looked up at him, eyes clear. "You're still coming, right?" Jonathan squeezed her hand. "Every day." Claire smiled. Not cautiously, not briefly, fully. And as they walked forward into the ordinary miracle of a safe morning, the world no longer saw a girl facing a cold brick wall in the dark. It saw a child moving toward light, with someone who stayed. And that's where this story gently ends. Even though all characters and events are fictional, this story was created for entertainment, to inspire hope, compassion, and the kind of quiet strength that restores faith in humanity. Thanks so much for spending your time with me. I'm James, wishing you warmth, kindness, and good company until our next story together. Oh, can't wait to see you back here soon, friend.